Zynn is called back from Australia to help resolve Chengfeng's problems, whose reputation has fallen. Zhiyu, eager to meet her benefactor, is restless all day. Dear viewers, will Chengfeng's strategy succeed in Suzhou? Let's follow the story to the end. Thank you.
Chapter 2537. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Zynn's private plane began to descend over the suburbs of Suzhou. Seeing that he was about to land at Suzhou-Hangzhou airport, he called his son Zhifei on his cell phone. Zhifei, who was involved in this matter, had already driven the car to Suzhou-Hangzhou airport. He parked the car in the parking lot and stayed in the car waiting for his father's message. Seeing his father's call, he hurriedly connected and asked, "Dad, where are you?" Zynn said, "In another 20 minutes or so, I should almost land." "Are you there yet?" "I'm here." Zhifei said, "Tell me after you leave the customs, I will pick you up." "Okay." Zynn told him, "Don't forget to wear a mask and sunglasses. Our Su family is too sensitive now. Don't let others notice that we are here in Suzhou." "I know, Dad." After hanging up the phone, Zhifei quickly put on a mask and sunglasses and drove the car to the main entrance of the airport arrival passage. After waiting for about 20 minutes, Zynn's figure appeared at the exit of the airport arrival hall. Like Zhifei, Zynn wears a pair of black sunglasses and a disposable black mask. However, Zhifei recognized him at a glance, and then quickly got out of the car, beckoned to him, and shouted, "Dad, here." When Zynn saw Zhifei, his spirit was shaken, and he ran over 2 steps quickly. Zhifei also accumulated a lot of negative energy in the past 2 days. Seeing his father finally came back, he felt a sense of finding support in his heart. He hurriedly greeted him and hugged him. At this moment, Zhifei could not help but choked up and whispered, "Dad, you finally came back." Zynn patted him on the back and sighed, "Hey. Zhifei, Dad is sorry to you, to your mother and Zhiyu. When you needed me the most, I couldn't protect you and be by your side." Zhifei said sadly, "Dad. Mom and Zhiyu, there is no idea of their whereabouts yet, you must find a way to find them." Zynn nodded solemnly, "Don't worry, I will go all out to find your mother and your sister." After speaking, he looked around, and said hurriedly, "Let's get in the car first, there are too many people here, so as not to attract attention." "Okay." Zhifei nodded hurriedly, turned to help Zynn open the passenger car door, and let Zynn sit in first. When Zhifei returned to the car, Zynn confessed to him, "Drive directly to the West Lake. Your grandfather has a villa on the edge of the West Lake. He lives there now." Zhifei nodded and said, "Then I will navigate to West Lake first. Give me instructions. The Su family's real estate in all parts of the country and even all over the world are too many. Almost any larger city will have Su family properties. How many villas the father has, even the father himself does not know. Even Zhifei has never been to the villa in Suzhou." Driving into the airport expressway, Zynn said to Zhifei next to him, "You'll see your grandpa later. Don't wait for your grandpa to apologize to you. You must take the initiative to apologize to him. It's best to be more solemn. Kneel down and apologize, do you understand?" Zhifei knew that this time when his father came back from Australia, it was the key to his father and his own right to regain inheritance. He couldn't mess it up anyway, so he solemnly said, "I know, Dad, don't worry. As soon as I see Grandpa, I will immediately kneel down and apologize to him." Originally, Zhifei was considered a man of spine, but in the face of huge benefits, his bones became much softer unconsciously. Zynn told him again, "This time your grandpa has encountered the biggest Waterloo in his life. Judging from the influence of video, it is impossible for your grandpa to turn over in this life, so this time it is our good opportunity. If we can grasp this opportunity, on the one hand, let your grandpa see our abilities, and on the other hand, let him see our absolute obedience to him, then we have the opportunity to inherit the entire Su family." With that said, Zynn's words turned and he said, "But if we can do it, your grandfather will definitely hand over the entire Su family's property to the Overseas Trust Fund before he dies. At that time, we can only lead the living expenses per capita." Zhifei hurriedly asked, "Dad, how can we make Grandpa recognize our ability?" Zynn said earnestly, "This time your mother and Zhiyu encountered an excellent opportunity. Anyone with a discerning eye can see it. This shows that someone wants to attack our family, and the opponent is extremely capable. It may have been planned for a long time. If we can help your grandfather, catch the black hands behind the scenes, and eliminate all the threats for the family, then we will definitely make your grandfather admire us. Immediately afterward, Zynn added, you have to know that your grandfather has been nailed to the pillar of shame now, and it will be impossible to wash him until he dies. So as long as he can be satisfied with us, and during the period before his death, we have been obedient to him, and while respecting him, we will never challenge his majesty as the head of the family. Then before he dies, he will definitely pass on the position of Su family patriarch to me. And as long as we survive until he dies, the entire Su family will be ours. Zhifei nodded quickly, and said excitedly, Dad, I listened to your everything. At around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Zhifei drove the car into a huge manor by the West Lake under the guidance of Zynn. West Lake is a well-known tourist attraction in the country, and more than half of the area is open to all people, so there are very few lakeside villas here, and the prices are extremely high. According to rumors, a famous domestic e-commerce boss, a boss named Jag, has a luxurious villa here, which is said to be worth several hundred million. However, his villa was even worse than Chengfeng's. The manor Chengfeng spent 800 million when he started it 10 years ago, and another 500 million was spent on renovation and reconstruction. After it was completed, he only came to live for a few days in the spring and autumn of each year. Zhifei drove into the manor. Butler Anson was already waiting at the entrance of the manor's main hall. As soon as he saw the father and son get out of the car, he hurried up to greet them and respectfully said, Master, young master. I didn't expect you two to come together. Zynn hurriedly asked, Butler, where is father now? Anson hurriedly said, Master has been looking forward to the two, so he told me to wait here early, and said that when you arrive, I must take you to see him immediately. Zynn hurriedly said, then take us there quickly. It is good. Anson took the father and son to the main hall of the manor. In the main hall at this time, Chengfeng, who was somewhat depressed, was sitting in front of the burning fireplace and resting. When he saw his son and grandson coming, hurriedly got up from the recliner, and walked in front, in 2 steps. The old tearfully said, Zynn, my son. I'm sorry about your family. Upon hearing this, Zhifei recalled his father's explanation. Without a second word, he knelt in front of Chengfeng and confessed, Grandpa. I didn't understand the rules and bumped into you. Please punish your culprit. Chengfeng's expression flashed with a look of satisfaction, and he quickly reached out to help Zhifei up, choked up, and said, Good boy, you're right, it's Grandpa. It's Grandpa who was so confused that he made such an impulsive decision for the family's face. Furthermore, I was wronged by the gangster again, and was charged with many unreasonable charges. Zynn hurriedly stepped forward, helped Chengfeng, and said seriously, Dad, don't say that. I know well to know that everything you do is for this family. Chengfeng nodded with satisfaction. You two can understand my difficulties, I can really look down upon death. Zynn nodded solemnly, Dad, don't worry, Zhifei and I can understand you very well. With tears in Chengfeng's eyes, he solemnly said, Zynn, I promise you that I will do my best to find Liona and Zhiyu. If Liona is still alive, I will face her and plead for the crime. Even if she wants my old life, I am willing to pay it to her. Zynn hurriedly said, Dad, our top priority now is not to find Liona and Zhiyu, nor to find Shoud, but to work together to pull out the enemy hidden in the dark. Zinn's words came to Chengfeng's heart. Although Chengfeng took the initiative to apologize to Zynn and Zhifei about Liona and Zhiyu's affairs as soon as he came up, deep down in his heart, he did not want Zynn. The father and son were troubled by this issue. So Zynn took the initiative to change the topic now, just to cater to Chengfeng's inner thoughts. So, he hurriedly said, You are right Zynn, we must work together to find out who is behind the scenes. With that said, he asked Zynn, Who do you think is behind us? Zynn subconsciously said, Dad, I don't think this matter has anything to do with the Wade family, but I don't have any evidence to prove that this matter is what the Wade family did. I can only speculate through the short video platform. It should be part of it to a certain extent, and Aurous Hill is in the Wade family's sphere of influence, which is their home court. Chengfeng nodded and said seriously, My previous thoughts were similar to yours, but now I feel that the Wade family seems unlikely to have such strength, otherwise, they will not wait until today to start with us. Zynn fell into deep thought. He had considered his father's point of view, and he didn't understand it. At this moment, Chengfeng looked at Zhifei on the side, pretending to be casual, and asked, "By the way, do you have any ideas? In your mind, are there any clues that are more suitable?" Zhifei hurriedly said, "Grandpa, I really can't think of any clues." Chengfeng nodded, and then pretended to remember something, and said, "Oh, right. You and Zhiyu were in Japan when you met a master. Who is that person? Have you found a clue?" "No," Zhifei said earnestly. "Zhiyu has always wanted to find her benefactor, but we have tried many methods without any substantial progress." Chengfeng felt nervous and asked hurriedly, "You met him at that time, could you describe his characteristics, including looks and temperament, to me?" Zhifei thought for a while, and said, "My benefactor should be about the same age as me, very young, and he must be a Chinese or Japanese Chinese. As for his looks, to be honest, he is very handsome. They are very tough, but still very characteristic." Chengfeng asked him, "Can you find a professional in criminal investigation to help you make a portrait of a character?" Zhifei hesitated for a moment, and said, "Grandpa, I thought about the portrait of him, but to be honest, we only had a passing intersection with him, and we were too nervous about what happened that day. So we really don't clearly remember the appearance, if we do it is a little vague. Unless we meet again, we can recognize him at a glance." Speaking of this, Zhifei couldn't help asking, "Grandpa, why did you suddenly ask about the matter of this master? Do you suspect that he is behind it this time?" Chengfeng sighed, pretending to say with emotion, "I am not suspicious, I am hopeful. I hope that this benefactor will control everything behind the back this time. In this case, I believe that Zhiyu and your mother will survive." Zhifei nodded lightly and said sincerely, "This master is a person with great supernatural powers. If it is really like what you said, I believe that it is much more likely that Mom and Zhiyu will be alive, but we have wanted to find him for so long, but since we haven't found him, the probability of him appearing in Aurous Hill is very low." Chengfeng smiled slightly. "Even if the possibility is very low, there is still a possibility. We have to think on the bright side of everything. If it is really him, then this incident is actually a misunderstanding. As long as the misunderstanding is resolved, this person may also be used by our Su family." After speaking, Chengfeng immediately ordered, "Zhifei, except Zhiyu, you are the only one who has seen the benefactor. He has saved you and will certainly not be malicious to you, so you follow my instructions and go immediately with a high profile to Aurous Hill. See if you can bring out the benefactor." When Zynn heard this, he subconsciously said, "Dad, Aurous Hill is very wicked. Young brother disappeared there. If Zhifei passes by with a high profile, I am afraid." Chengfeng waved his hand, "Don't be afraid. My guess is generally not wrong. What we have to do now is to lead the snake out of the cave." Zinn's expression couldn't help being a little tangled. Zhiyu's whereabouts are still unknown and her life or death is still unknown, so he is really reluctant to let Zhifei go to Aurous Hill to take a big risk. Xiao was so high profile that he was tied up as soon as he arrived in Aurous Hill. If Zhifei also goes very high profile, then 80% chance is the repeat of the mistakes of Xiao. The only possibility of exemption is that the old man is imprisoned. The mysterious man who turned his hands in the clouds and covered his hands in the rain behind Aurous Hill is the benefactor who saved his son and daughter in Japan. Just when he was hesitant, Zhifei mustered up the courage and said seriously, "Grandpa, I am willing to go to Aurous Hill." Chengfeng nodded in satisfaction and smiled, as expected of my Su family's eldest grandson. Courage is extraordinary. After speaking, he asked, "By the way, Zhifei, I heard that you sponsored a concert before, and it seems to be held in Aurous Hill." Zhifei nodded. "Yes, Grandpa, I sponsored Sara, Miss Gu's global tour. She is well known as Sara in the entertainment industry. Aurous Hill is her first stop this year." Chengfeng smiled and said, "It turned out to be the girl from the Zhiyu family. That girl is also very well known now, so if you go to Aurous Hill this time, you will be able to show up in the public eye in the name of sponsoring the concert." Zhifei hurriedly said, "Okay Grandpa, I understand." Chengfeng suddenly had a thought in his mind at this time. Knowing that this kid, he is definitely not doing nothing idle, and he is not a dude who is not doing his job. Why do you want to do something like sponsoring a concert? Things in the entertainment industry are indeed tall for ordinary people, but for super-class families, it's not even AF at RT. How many top stars in the entertainment industry have sharpened their heads and want to marry into these super-class families, but the offspring of these top families are a little bit compelling, and they won't even look at them. Knowing that it is Sus' grandson if he beckons in the entertainment industry, I don't know how many top female stars will rush forward desperately, but he ran to sponsor the concert of the girl from the Zhiyu family. This is obviously a bit of a drunkard. It's not about wine. Thinking of this, Chengfeng's eyes turned, and he planned to give Zhifei a choice. Therefore, he deliberately pretended to be very sincere and sighed, "Oh, let me just say something from my heart. The girl in the Zhiyu family is still very good overall. Although the strength of the family is a little worse, it is better than the image of other girls. Good, and dignified." After speaking, he looked at Zhifei and said earnestly, "Zhifei, you are now at the age of marrying and getting a wife. If you can catch the girl of the Zhiyu family, it would be a good thing for the Su family." Quote. Zhifei suddenly became excited when he heard this, and blurted out, "Grandpa, you support me in pursuing Sara." Zhifei had a crush on Sara for many years but only told his sister Zhiyu about this. The reason why he didn't dare to say it was because he knew that the Su family could not allow him to be with Sara. Elder Su has always been above the top, and he has never looked down upon these families in China. Moreover, he has always been eager to make major breakthroughs in overseas markets. Therefore, he especially hoped that Zhifei, as the eldest son of the Su family, could marry a daughter of a top European or American family, or a European royal princess. In this way, the Su family can exchange resources with them. Otherwise, if you only find a family with a weaker overall strength than the Su family to marry in the country, then it is clear that others will take advantage of the Su family. Because of this, Zhifei dare not make any relevant disclosures. However, he never dreamed that his visionary grandfather would take the initiative to encourage him to pursue Sara. This was simply great news for him. However, Zhifei didn't know that Elder Su easily analyzed his true purpose from his sponsorship of Sara's concert. Saying that now, it's just a matter of doing what he wants. Chengfeng deeply understands a truth. This truth is only 3 words, D*CK drives everything. If you want to make the best use of a person, that is, you must master where his S3 shual interest is. Chengfeng understood Zhifei's deep inner S3 shual interest, so he chose to do what he liked, support him in pursuing Sara, and directly tied him firmly in his camp in one step. Therefore, when Zhifei expressed absolute shock at what he said, Chengfeng said in a serious manner, "Zhifei, the most important thing about choosing a spouse is the price-effectiveness ratio. Ability and character are good. Although Gu's strength is a bit inferior, she is better than others. If you really marry her, it will be a very cost-effective thing. So if you really want to pursue her, of course, I agree with you with both hands." Zhifei immediately said excitedly, "Thank you, Grandpa. With your words, I am relieved." Zynn on the side, this was the first time he knew that what his son liked in his heart turned out to be Sara of the Zhiyu family. He frowned and said earnestly, "Zhifei, you like Gu's girl, and Dad doesn't object to it, but you have to know that Gu's family has always had prejudices against Sus' family, especially Philip Zhiyu and Chengfeng back then. It's his elder brother to worship. Since I set up the anti-weight alliance, he has completely drawn a line from the Su family. If you pursue Sara, the first thing you have to pass is his level." Zhifei nodded and said, "Dad, I have considered all of what you said. The old accounts between my parents are indeed a relatively large influence, but I still believe that feelings are the first. Yes, if I can really make Sara like me, then I believe I can also make Sara's father accept me." Zynn sighed sincerely, "I'm afraid it won't be that easy." Chengfeng couldn't help but slapped his lips. He racked his brains to make suggestions for his grandson. He said, "Oh, I don't think there is any need to make a conclusion on this matter so early. I know that he is only 26 this year, even if he is married at 36. It's not too late, so he has time for Gu's family to change their attitude towards him." As he said, he couldn't help but said with a little regret, "I heard that Philip had pancreatic cancer and he was about to die. If that's the case, he would lose one stumbling block if he wanted to pursue Zhiyu's girl, but who knew this? Why did the guy heal suddenly inexplicably? He is alive, and the difficulty will indeed be much greater. Zhifei said at this time, Grandpa, since you support me, I will definitely pursue Sara. As long as she is willing to be with me, I believe her father can't stop us from being together. Yes, Chengfeng said with a smile, you can rest assured and boldly pursue her. Grandpa will give you 100 or 1,000 times support. As he said very seriously, if Philip is unwilling to forgive the Su family for the anti-Wade alliance, things back then let your father come to the door personally and beg him to plead for the crime. If it still doesn't work, then my old bone will personally apologize to him. For the lifelong happiness of my grandson, what is such a trivial matter? Old man's attitude immediately moved Zhifei. Comparing this with the unquestionable personality that Grandpa said before, it was a radical change. He thought it was impossible for his grandfather to allow him to pursue Sara, but he did not expect that he would support him so much. This instantly increased his confidence in pursuing Sara countless times. So he immediately stated, Grandpa, if that's the case, then I will go to Aurous Hill now to see if I can bring out the Black Hand by preparing for the concert. Chengfeng nodded in satisfaction and smiled. I asked Anson to invite the head of the Suzhou first family, Regnar Wu from the Wu family. It is estimated that he should be here in a while. Don, leave in a hurry. It's not too late to leave after dinner. It is good. At this moment, Aurous Hill Shagri-La Zhiyu was bored in the hotel room for a day, feeling anxious and impatient. At 6 o'clock, Isaac's men knocked on the door on time, and 2 female bodyguards walked in with a food delivery tray. One of them respectfully said, Ms. Su, Ms. Du, dinner is ready, please take a second step. Dining in the restaurant, Zhiyu couldn't help asking, when on earth your young master would like to see me? I have been waiting all day. The female bodyguard said very politely, sorry Miss Su, our young master did not come today. Zhiyu asked, then did he say when he would come? The female bodyguard shook her head, master never said it. Zhiyu didn't give up, and asked, well, can you please call your young master and say I want to talk to him? The female bodyguard smiled slightly, you tell me, I am not qualified to talk to the young master directly, so I don't have the young master's contact information. Zhiyu's eyes flashed red and choked up, then what does your master mean? It took so much work to save us and settle us here, but he kept hiding. If he doesn't show up, if he really doesn't plan to show up, let my mother and I leave here. The female bodyguard said apologetically, Ms. Su, the young master really didn't mean that, it is just I servant dared to speculate. As for what you said to leave here, I can do this. The young master has ordered us to make sure you two please forgive me for staying in this suite and keeping every step of the way. Zhiyu suddenly felt a strong grievance in her heart, and tears flowed out. Seeing this, the female bodyguard said apologetically, Miss Su, the food is ready, please help yourself and Ms. Du, we will go out first. Liona hurried forward, holding Zhiyu in her arms and gently comforting her, while saying to the 2 female bodyguards, thank you so much. The 2 made a polite statement and hurriedly left the room. As soon as they left the room, the 2 of them came to Isaac's office. After knocking on the door and entering, facing Isaac and Charlie sitting on the sofa, they respectfully said, young master, president, Miss Su is a little excited. Quote, Isaac hurriedly said, tell me, what exactly is the excitement method? The female bodyguard recounted the situation from just now. After listening, Isaac nodded and said, okay, you have worked hard, go and rest. The female bodyguard bowed and resigned. At this moment, Isaac looked at Charlie and couldn't help asking, Master, are you really not going to see her? Isaac's words made Charlie hesitate slightly. Whether he wants to meet Zhiyu and Liona, he hasn't decided yet. The main reason is that he doesn't want to understand what mentality he should use to face an enemy's daughter and a woman who has loved his father for many years. But he knew it in his heart. Things have reached the point where they are today. Sooner or later, he has to meet the mother and daughter. Therefore, he has not yet determined whether it is the right time to meet them right now. At this time, Isaac saw Charlie's hesitation, and hurriedly persuaded him, Master, to be honest, since you will see them sooner or later, it is better to see them earlier. As he said again, look, now Miss Su's status is almost equal to house arrest here. If you don't meet her, I am afraid she will be uncomfortable. This is also torture for her. It's better to meet her and let her feel at ease so that she can continue to stay here without causing any trouble. Charlie said indifferently, I definitely want to see her, but it's not the time yet. Isik asked hurriedly, Master, are you waiting for an opportunity? Opportunity? Charlie shook his head. I'm waiting for Zynn Su. Isik exclaimed, Master, you want to wait for Zynn? Yes. Charlie said coldly, I'll wait for him to come to Aurous Hill. If he doesn't come, I will personally, please, him over. The day Zynn comes to Aurous Hill, I would naturally take him to meet Zhiyu and Liona. Speaking of this, Charlie stood up and said blankly, after he comes here, I will personally take him to my parents' grave and bow down. If he is not directly related to the death of my parents, let him give my parents a kowtow. If he is directly related to the death of my parents, I will let him pay for his life at my parents' grave. At 6:30 in the evening, Ragnar Wu drove to Sus Manor. He also came with his eldest son Roger. The father and son arrived in the manor in their car, and the housekeeper Anson personally greeted them. As soon as they met, he said politely, Mr. Wu, Master Wu, our master is already waiting in the banquet hall, please come with me. Ragnar couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He didn't come to have dinner with Chengfeng this time. He came to Chengfeng as an undercover agent at Charlie's request. Charlie is a person 10,000 people can't afford to offend him, not to mention Charlie's background, his ability alone is far from what he dares to offend. Killing the 8 heavenly kings of the Wu family by one person really annoyed him, maybe he could kill all the Wu family by himself. However, Chengfeng here can't afford to offend him at all. Who is Chengfeng? The person in charge of the first family in the country is simply the strongest person in the financial field, and if he provokes him, he may not end well. Therefore, Ragnar was nervous and afraid in his heart. However, he was also very clear in his heart that, no matter what, he must act as one who couldn't offend Charlie the most. Since Charlie asked him to be an undercover agent, he could only bite the bullet. Later, he and Roger followed Anson to the banquet hall of the manor. At this time, in the banquet hall, 3 generations of the Su family, Chengfeng, Zynn, and Zhifei were sitting at the front of the dining table. Seeing Ragnar and his son coming in, Chengfeng took the initiative to stand up and said with a smile, Mr. Wu, I have heard of the name for a long time, and I finally meet you today. Ragnar hurriedly said a little flattered, Mr. Su, you are so polite. Compared with you, I am just a small business person who does a little bit of innocent business. I can't get on the table. Chengfeng waved his hand and said with a smile, whereas this, your Wu family is the #1 family in Suzhou, even in the whole province, so why to belittle yourself? After speaking, he hurriedly said again, come here, Mr. Wu, let me introduce to you, this is my son, Zynn Su, and the other is my grandson, Zhifei Su. Ragnar couldn't help but feel a little surprised, and he thought to himself, unexpectedly, this Zynn also came to Suhong. Didn't this guy ran to Australia because of a scandal some time ago? Also, Chengfeng murdered Zinn's wife and daughter. Why is this guy standing in front of Chengfeng so respectfully? Isn't it necessary for him to avenge his wife and child? Seeing Ragnar stunned, Zynn suddenly guessed Ragnar's psychological activities. He couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. So he first stretched out his hand and said, hello, Mr. Wu, I'm Zynn, I'm lucky enough to meet. Only then did Ragnar came back to his senses, and hurriedly clasped his fists and said, Mr. Su, look up for a long time. I'm Ragnar, this is the son Roger. Chengfeng said at this time, Mr. Wu, please sit down, let's eat and talk. Ragnar quickly agreed. 5 people were seated in front of the huge dining table. Chengfeng took the initiative to hold up the wine glass and toast Ragnar. After 3 rounds of wine, he smiled and said, Mr. Wu, this time I come to Suzhou. It is considered to be on your site, so please take care of us in Suzhou in the future. Ragnar said nervously, Mr. Su, you are so polite. It is absolutely my honor you think of Ragnar when you come to Suzhou. In the future, you can use me for anything. Chengfeng smiled and said, since Mr. Wu has said so, then I won't be polite to you, but Mr. Wu, please rest assured. If you have any help from our Su family, please do not hesitate to speak. Ragnar clasped his fists and said, then I would like to thank Mr. Su in advance. Chengfeng nodded, put down the wine glass, and said, by the way, Mr. Wu, I want to ask you something, I don't know if it is convenient for you. Ragnar hurriedly said, sir, please tell me. Chengfeng said, that's it. I want to know Mr. Wu, how much do you know about Aurous Hill? This. Ragnar thought for a while, and said, actually, I don't know much about Aurous Hill. It's just that my son went to university in Aurous Hill. In fact, Ragnar didn't want to be a last resort and didn't want to talk to anyone about his second son Wuqi. Because Wuqi had already been harassed by all the people all over the country at the time when Wuqi was involved. When he mentioned it, it was tantamount to hitting him in the face. However, Chengfeng asked about his understanding of Aurous Hill's situation at this time. Ragnar didn't dare to conceal Wuqi's schooling in Aurous Hill, because no one knew about this matter in the whole country. If he deliberately concealed it, it will definitely arouse Chengfeng's suspicion. When Chengfeng heard him talk about Wuqi, he nodded slightly and said apologetically, I'm sorry, Mr. Wu, I know there are some things I shouldn't say here. Ragnar knew what he wanted to say next, so he could only smile awkwardly, and said, Mr. Su, if you have any questions, just ask, don't be so polite. Chengfeng nodded and said, Mr. Wu, frankly speaking, I have heard about your little son. What I want to ask is, have you checked why he has this kind of behavior, what is wrong with him? Why it is happening? Why? Ragnar cursed secretly in his heart, of course it's because of Charlie's be it starred. He has already admitted this in front of me, but I can't provoke him and dare not fight him. However, Ragnar did not dare to say what he was thinking. Therefore, he could only deliberately said in shrouded mist, this, to be honest, after his accident, Shaoxin and I went to Aurous Hill as soon as possible. We also wanted to find out what caused the community. There has been such a big change, but after a lot of investigation, no valuable clues have been found. Chengfeng was a little disappointed, and then asked, Mr. Wu, then, do you think the incident with your youngest son is a natural disaster, or is it an unnatural disaster? Hearing Chengfeng's question, Charlie's image reappeared in Ragnar's mind. He couldn't help feeling a deep cold deep in his heart. Then he replied, Mr. Su, let me tell you about my son. I also suspected that it might be man-made, but after investigating a lot, no relevant clues were found, so the possibility of a natural cause may be greater, or the children himself stimulated something beyond our comprehension. Chengfeng asked him, have you ever asked your son what unusual memories or impressions he had before and after the incident? Ragnar said truthfully, I asked him about this, but he told me that there was a memory gap before the incident, and he couldn't remember it at all. Chengfeng nodded thoughtfully, and said in a deep voice, if this is the case, then I guess it is more likely to have mental nature. Ragnar pretended to be shocked and asked, Mr. Su, do you mean someone deliberately harmed my son? Yes. Chengfeng said seriously, generally speaking, even if someone has a mental problem, they don't have such a strange behavior as your son. After speaking, he asked again, and I heard that your son's condition seems to occur every hour, right? Ragnar said awkwardly, yes, it is true. Chengfeng hummed, and said solemnly, then this is even more problematic. Normally, even if a person has intermittent psychosis, intermittent epilepsy, or even intermittent convulsions, this is relatively random. There are absolutely no rules at all, so some people will fall asleep, suddenly get up and sleepwalk, or suddenly have a goat's seizure and convulsions, but when they heard of someone, it's like this every hour frequency. This is obviously not right. Ragnar said, of course I knew something was wrong, and I also knew that all this was done by that bastard Charlie. But what can I do? Our 8 heavenly kings were all taken care of by him. If I still confront him, maybe I will be like my son someday, becoming a hapless guy who eats that thing every hour. Thinking of this, he was depressed, and on the surface, he pretended to be extremely shocked and asked, Mr. Su, do you think anyone has such an ability to make my son suffer from this disease? Chengfeng said, there are too many possibilities for this kind of thing. Whether it is the mystery of feng shui in our country or the puppets in Southeast Asia, there are methods that cannot be explained by science. I think you should find a metaphysical master for your son. If your son takes a good look, he may be able to see where the problem is. Master of metaphysics, Regnar said earnestly. To be honest, our family really doesn't know any master of metaphysics, but I have heard that some people in Hong Kong seem to be engaged in feng shui metaphysics. I don't know if there are any experts there. Quote, Chengfeng said, Hong Kong has probably the most developed metaphysics in the 3 regions of the Taiwan Strait, but if you want to really talk about the top metaphysics masters, you still have to go to the United States to find them. America. Regnar was even more surprised, and asked, Mr. Su, I don't quite understand. Isn't feng shui metaphysics the thing of our Chinese ancestors? Why do the top academic masters look at America? Chengfeng smiled indifferently and said earnestly, as long as the masters of metaphysics are very powerful, they are basically from their ancestors for several generations, even dozens of generations, who have been studying metaphysics assiduously. In times of turbulence, some really capable older generations of metaphysical masters will figure out clues in advance and then avoid them in advance. After speaking, he explained, anyone who has studied history knows that in 37 years, we have experienced a huge ordeal in China. At that time, many top metaphysical families had already calculated the disaster of China land 1 or 2 years in advance. Many have fled overseas in advance. Those who have not escaped are either those masters who serve the country and the people, or those who have the insufficient ability and limited skills, and cannot be counted as 2 swords of disaster. And those top masters who stayed devoted their efforts to Zhongshan Sheji. In addition to the 8 Years' War, there were deaths and injuries, and a large number of domestic metaphysical masters withered, but the ones who fled overseas were intact. Survived. Regnar couldn't help asking, Mr. Su, there is still something unclear below. Why did these escaped metaphysical masters go to the United States? Chengfeng smiled and said, recall the history of World War II you learned in junior high school. At that time, the whole world was swamped. Europe, known as the birthplace of modern civilization, was also turned into a puddle of mud. Even Britain was blown to ruins. Needless to say, continental Europe, looking at the whole world, there was only the United States that year. Except for a small attack on Pearl Harbor, the mainland was almost out of the war. The true masters of metaphysics have long been there for the peace and peace of the United States, so almost all of them have a brain. Fleeing to the United States, other people's World War II was a raging war. These people's World War II was to survive in America. After all, Chengfeng said again, if you need it, I can help you find a top metaphysical master from the United States and let him see your son's situation. Regnar asked a little excitedly, Mr. Su, is what you said is true? Of course. Chengfeng smiled slightly and said seriously, since we are all interested in being tied together to do something big, then I must show something, so let's arrange for someone to contact and let the master sit as soon as possible. The plane is coming. If the speed is fast, the master may be there tomorrow night. Although Regnar didn't dare to betray Charlie, he couldn't help getting excited when he thought that the master of metaphysics that Chengfeng had found might really be able to heal his son. This also made him feel the feeling of having the right in the right. If he could cleverly mediate between Charlie and Su's family, wouldn't he be able to please both sides and obtain benefits from both sides? Thinking of this, Regnar hurriedly stood up, clasped his fists in his hands, bowed, and said, I'm taking the place of the dog, thank you, Mr. Su. If you need to be here in the future, just give a command, and don't let it go. Chengfeng waved his hand and said casually, Mr. Wu, between you and me, you are welcome. After speaking, he looked at Zynn and told him, Zynn, you turn back to talk to Mr. Mai in Los Angeles. It is best to ask him to come out and visit Suzhou. Zynn nodded and hurriedly said, I know Dad. It is estimated that the time in Los Angeles is not bright yet. Should I wait an hour or 2 before contacting? Okay. Chengfeng smiled and said with emotion, I haven't seen Mr. Mai in years. If he is willing to show his face and come here in person, I will also ask him to do the calculations for me. I have encountered various blows, maybe it has a lot to do with feng shui luck. In fact, Chengfeng himself is not very faithful. His long-dead old father believed in feng shui fate, but he didn't buy it. Chengfeng's acting style is very harsh, so he always believes that man can conquer the sky. When he is young, he will act vigorously and resolutely when he is young. However, Chengfeng now has more or less murmurs in his heart. It's a damn reciting words. If it's a coincidence, it's really a bit unreasonable. How can such bad luck and bad things happen to him? If it is not a coincidence, it is estimated that something happened in the fortune, otherwise, it should not be unlucky. Therefore, he wanted to take this opportunity to let the authoritative feng shui take a look. Mr. Mai, whom he asked Zynn to contact, followed his father and fled to the United States from Eastcliff in early 37. At the time, the 5 great feng shui families in China were the Lai family, the Zheng family, the Liao family, the Yang family, and the Mai family. These 5 people, without exception, have all settled overseas. The old generation of the Mai family had a good personal relationship with Chengfeng's father, so when Chengfeng's father was alive, he often asked them to come back and give advice. However, since the death of his father, Chengfeng has not been interested in this aspect, so he drifted away from them. But having said that, although there hasn't been any contact in recent years, the foundation of the relationship between the two families is still there. Ragnar is also not very faithful. However, he is now holding the attitude of trying and not asking for money, and he has accomplished it. If he fails, he has no loss. It is precisely with this feeling of having a source of both ends, Ragnar's psychological pressure is suddenly relieved a lot. Coupled with Chengfeng's very polite attitude, Ragnar really felt at home. After dinner, Chengfeng asked Zynn to send the father and son out. On the way back, Ragnar still had a smug smile on his face. In any case, it is a good thing to be able to establish contact with a top-notch family like the Su family. It may indeed open up a little commercial cooperation. As long as the Su family gives some resources at hand, the Wu family will be able to improve. Roger saw his father's excitement, but he felt a little unhappy. 10,000 in his heart didn't want his brother Wu Qi to heal, because once his brother healed, he would rob him of property. Chengfeng suddenly threw such an olive branch, which made him feel very angry. But he didn't dare to show his feelings in front of his father, so he could only ask, "Dad, the Su family wants to help us find a feng shui master, do you want to report to Charlie?" Ragnar said without hesitation, "Of course this kind of thing can't be reported, otherwise, if Charlie makes a little action behind his back, wouldn't your brother have no chance of healing?" Roger said with some worry, "But the task that Charlie assigned us is to be his dual spy. If we deliberately conceal the clues and don't tell him, will he not blame us if he knows?" Quote, Chapter 2548. Ragnar hesitated for a moment and then said, "The situation must be partially reported, but it is still necessary to have reservations. It is best to avoid the serious and keep it light." As he said, he took out his mobile phone and sent Charlie a voice message, "Mr. Wade, you really have a brilliant plan. Chengfeng invited me to dinner tonight. At the dinner table, he said that he would work closely with us. I have agreed. I will report to you in time if he has any movements next." After receiving this information, Charlie replied with the word, "Okay," in the text. When Ragnar received the word, "Okay," he smiled slightly and said, "Look, isn't this solved? What we have to do now is to make Charlie feel that we are doing our best for him, and make Chengfeng feels that we are indeed an object worthy of his careful cultivation. As long as we can do this well, we will be able to meet the two top families of the Wade family and the Su family." This night, Zhifei returned to Aurous Hill alone. The task that Chengfeng gave him, in addition to continuing to try to find his mother and sister, also required him to actively prepare for Sara's concert in Aurous Hill soon, and try to take this opportunity to catch Sara. When Zhifei arrived in Aurous Hill, he went directly to his grandfather's old house in the city. What he didn't expect was that his grandfather, uncle, and second uncle had already put aside the things at hand and came to Aurous Hill. At the same time, they had begun to mobilize all resources to search for the whereabouts of his mother and sister. When his grandfather Mr. Du saw him, he was surprised and asked, "I know, you suddenly disappeared inexplicably, where did you go?" Zhifei hurriedly drove himself from Eastcliff to Aurous Hill, and then went to Suhong to meet with his father and grandfather. However, He did not say anything about the selection of the Su family's successor. As soon as Mr. Du heard that he was almost beaten by Chengfeng's messenger, he fled all the way to Aurous Hill. Naturally, he felt very distressed for this grandson. Thinking of the missing daughter and granddaughter, he choked with tears in his eyes. "Boy, you have suffered. Don't worry, Grandpa will not let you suffer this kind of grievance again. Also, your two uncles, and myself, this time will stay in Aurous Hill, and go all out to find the whereabouts of your mother and sister. If they are still alive, everything is easy to say, but if they encounter unexpected events, I will definitely not let your be-it-starred grandfather go." Hearing what Grandpa said, Zhifei's eyes were red, and he nodded heavily. However, even he himself did not expect that at this moment, he suddenly felt a trace of pride in his heart. He also had Ragnar's experience of being both right and left. The always strong grandfather, for the sake of fame and family, wants to come over to please him, and Grandpa's side, because of these things I have encountered, especially loves me. If in the future I really become the heir of the Su family, with the huge business empire of the entire family on the one hand, and the strong relationship background of the Du family on the other, I can even take the Su family to a higher level in the future. If I can successfully collect Sara in my bag, it would be equivalent to harvesting half of the Zhiyu family. By then, I will combine the assets of the Su family, the background of the Du family, and half of the Zhiyu family's industry, then I will be the richest man in the world. Under the whole world, who else can compete with me? Now it seems that my next top priority is to win Sara. Thinking of this, Zhifei had a strong urge to turn Sara into his own woman immediately. The dream of the world's richest man, like a curse, quickly changed Zhifei's heart. Now he no longer cares about the life and death of his mother and sister. All he wants in his head is the supreme title of the world's richest man,